There's a benchmark score between GPT 5.4 and Gemini 3.1 that nobody in the mainstream media is even mentioning, and it reveals something unsettling about where AI is actually headed. When these two models dropped their latest versions, the tech blogs did what they always do. They ran the same 5 benchmarks everyone talks about. MMLU, human eval, some reasoning tests. And yeah, both models crushed it. But then I started digging into the actual research papers, the ones buried in GitHub repos and academic submissions, and I found something the hype cycle completely skipped over. There's a benchmark called GPQA, Gradient-Based Problem Question Answering, and it's basically a test that measures whether an AI can solve genuinely difficult, multi-step scientific problems that require real reasoning, not just pattern matching. It's harder than it sounds. We're talking PhD-level chemistry, physics, biology questions where you can't just regurgitate training data. You actually have to think. GPT 5.4 scored 78% on GPQA. Gemini 3.1 scored 71%. That's a 7-point gap. In machine learning, that's huge. But here's the thing nobody's talking about. That gap tells you something critical about the architecture difference between these two models, and it hints at a problem that's going to matter way more than raw speed or token count in the next year or two. Let me back up. When we talk about AI benchmarks, there's usually a hierarchy. You've got your flashy consumer benchmarks, like, can it write a poem? Can it summarize text? Those are easy. Both models crush those equally. Then you've got your reasoning benchmarks. Can it solve math problems, logical puzzles? That's where things get interesting. And then you've got your research grade benchmarks, the ones that actually test whether the model is learning to reason or just memorizing patterns at scale. GPQA lives in that third category. It's not testing what you'd ask ChatGPT on a Tuesday afternoon. It's testing whether the model has actually internalized reasoning skills. And the 7-point gap between GPT 5.4 and Gemini 3.1 is significant because it suggests that OpenAI's latest architecture, whatever they did under the hood with 5.4, is better at generalizing reasoning to unseen problems. Now, why hasn't anyone talked about this? 2 reasons. First, it doesn't fit the narrative. The tech press is obsessed with comparing the shiny consumer features. Gemini's multimodal stuff is flashy. GPT 5.4 speed improvements are sexy. A 7-point gap on an obscure reasoning benchmark doesn't generate clicks. Second, most people don't actually read the papers. They read the summaries written by people who read the summaries. By the time the story gets filtered down, the nuance is gone. But here's why this matters to you, specifically right now. If you're using AI for anything that requires actual problem solving, coding, research, designing systems, debugging complex issues, this gap is the difference between a tool that's gotten genuinely smarter and a tool that's gotten faster at things it already knew how to do. Let me give you a concrete example. Say you're a software engineer using these models to help debug a tricky concurrency issue in your codebase. You give the model your code, you describe the problem, and you ask it to figure out where the race condition is. That's not a problem the model has seen before in training. Every codebase is unique. It has to reason through the code, understand the execution flow, predict where threads might collide, and suggest a fix. GPT 5.4, with its higher GPQA score, is more likely to nail that. Gemini 3.1 might get it, but it's more likely to hallucinate or miss the subtle timing issue because it's pattern matching rather than reasoning. That gap compounds. The more novel the problem, the wider the gap gets. Here's the second thing this benchmark gap reveals. It suggests that Gemini 3.1, despite its speed and multimodal chops, might be hitting a scaling ceiling. Google's been pushing the multi-model angle, image, video, audio, text, all in one model. That's impressive from an engineering standpoint, but it comes with a trade-off. You can't optimize for everything. You can't be the fastest at reasoning and the best at image understanding and the smoothest at video processing. Something has to give. OpenAI seems to have chosen to optimize for reasoning depth in 5.4, even if it means slower inference and higher compute costs. Google optimized for breadth, doing everything okay, nothing amazing. That's a strategic choice, and it's reflected in the benchmarks that matter most. Now, I'm not saying Gemini 3.1 is bad. It's not. It's a phenomenal model for certain use cases. If you're building an AI system that needs to process images and text together, Gemini's unified architecture is genuinely better. But if your bottleneck is reasoning, if you need an AI that can think through novel problems, GPT 5.4 has a real edge, and the GPQA score proves it. The broader implication is this. We're entering a phase where the AI models are starting to specialize. The days of one model being best at everything are over. You're going to need to pick tools based on what you actually need to do, not just which model has the bigger name. And the only way to make that decision is to look at the benchmarks that actually matter for your use case, not the ones that make headlines. That's why I'm obsessed with diving into these papers. Because the real story of AI progress isn't in the press releases. It's in the datasets, the benchmark scores, and the architectural choices that nobody's talking about. And if you want to actually understand what's happening in AI, not the hype, not the headlines, but the actual technical progress, you need to know where to look. So here's the thing. If you want me to keep breaking down these benchmarks, the papers nobody's reading, and what they actually mean for how you should be using these tools, subscribe. I'm doing this every few days, pulling apart the research, translating it into plain language, so you don't have to dig through GitHub and AR14 yourself. Hit subscribe, and you'll stay ahead of the hype cycle.